So recently, I've not been able to stream much because of one thing and another, but then Stray came out, and I've absolutely loved playing it on stream. It's got a ton of fantastic scientific concept hidden behind its adorable cat-focused exterior. So today, let's dive into it and see what kind of science we can find. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of The Science Of, the show where I take a look at the science behind your favourite games, shows and more. Today, we're taking a look at Stray, the first game developed by BlueTwelve Studio. And for a first title, I've got to say I am impressed. Stray is absolutely incredible. It features an interesting cyberpunk world that you explore with some simple mechanics, and there's a constant creepy feeling that there's always something out to get you, because there normally is. In case you've not tried out these cybernetic feline adventures, you play as a stray cat who traverses a post-apocalyptic world by leaping across platforms, solving puzzles, and running away from the odd enemy or two. Throughout the game, you'll need to survive the harsh and deadly environments found under the surface, and in most cases, rather than attacking enemies with your claws, you'll be running away from them. In fact, the main action button in Stray has your cat meow. This can be used to attract more enemies to your location, or just to brighten up the day of robotic denizens of the underground slums. And you're not alone throughout your adventure. You're joined by a tiny back-based drone called B12, who assists you throughout your adventure by hacking computers to open doors and light up dark passages. Now, just a moment ago, I mentioned that throughout Stray, you'd be running away from swarms of enemies. But just what are these bloody crab-looking things? Well, they're called Zurks, and throughout the game you'll learn more about what the Zurks are, where they came from, and just how deadly they can be. So before I go any further, here is your spoiler warning. Please go and play Stray, then come back, because spoilers are coming ahead. I won't be discussing any of the game's key plot points, but I will be discussing the origins of the Zurks and some of the world building elements that are introduced throughout the game. If you don't care about spoilers, then go ahead and keep watching, because there really is some fascinating science behind this cyberpunk cat game. Okay, so let's get into the Zurks. The Zurks are a bacterial race that was developed in order to deal with an ever-growing waste crisis throughout the underground city scene throughout Stray. The idea was simple. Instead of throwing waste onto the poor people of the slums, the city dwellers would instead feed their waste to bacteria, engineering them to dissolve both organic and inorganic matter. This bacteria grew and developed to eat more than just cities' rubbish, however, and this naturally poses a risk to the helper robots relegated to the slums, as the Zurks have an appetite for all kinds of metal. This is told to us through memories we receive throughout the game, and through Memory 9, we find that they were developed through the waste management company
Corp. They were responsible for waste management. As trash from the upper levels overloaded the slums, they tried to develop a bacteria to dissolve it all. After the humans disappeared, that bacteria mutated, growing, eating way more than trash. And now we have Zurks.
So let's take a deep dive into this bacterial menace and see how close we are in the real world to a Zurk infestation. But before we get into this, we have to do a little fact that seems to spoil the fun a bit whenever I talk about cellular organisms. You wouldn't get bacteria the size of Zurks for millions of years after the bacteria have been introduced into the world. However, in the case of Stray and its post-apocalyptic setting, our titular Stray is living perfectly fine upon the surface world, which suggests that whatever caused the humans to be forced underground could have happened possibly billions of years ago. Now, the Earth is roughly 4.5 billion years old, and things were going well for a billion years or so until the first single-cell organism appeared at around 3.5 billion years ago. And can you imagine how long it took from then to produce a multicellular organism like the Zurks? Well, in comparison to billions of years, it's not that long, only 600 million years ago. So that's the kind of time period we're looking at for our bacteria to evolve into the robot munching monsters we see by the time the game takes place. Now, when it comes to natural decomposition of waste, that already includes a lot of bacteria to eat organic matter, and that's a whole topic on its own. What I'm more interested in is the use of bacteria that could digest metal, and therefore possess a huge risk to the robotic population of the underground. Whilst the bacteria in Stray is genetically engineered to aggressively break down metal, in the real world we have naturally occurring bacteria that can do this job without any genetic engineering required. Meet Leptospirillum ferrifilum, a gram-negative spiral-shaped bacteria. This bacteria oxidizes metals like iron using the same method of disintegration that occurs during rusting. Rusting is the name given for the oxidation of iron, Rust, otherwise known as iron oxide, is a form of corrosion that is caused by a chemical reaction that affects masses of iron and steel. Rust requires three main chemicals in order to form: iron, oxygen, and water. This involves two distinct electrochemical reactions. First of all, there is the anodic dissolution or oxidation of iron going into water, and during this, the iron loses 4 electrons. At the same time, the cathodic reduction of oxygen dissolving into water also occurs, taking 4 electrons released by the iron and making 4 hydroxide ions. Following this, the iron and hydroxide ions react to form iron hydroxide, and then this reacts with oxygen to form iron oxide and water. But how can bacteria cause this oxidation? Well, chemotrophic bacteria such as L. ferrophyllum derive energy by oxidizing dissolved ferrous iron. They're known for living in water containing as little as 0.1 milligrams of iron per litre of water, regardless of whether or not the water has sufficient levels of dissolved oxygen required for oxidation. Bacteria can break down iron into rust thanks to bacterial anaerobic corrosion. This is very similar to the rust mechanisms discussed earlier. Metal is oxidized under anaerobic conditions thanks to protons of water. Hydrogen plus ions are reduced to form hydrogen gas. This is the equation we saw earlier. Usually, a thin film of molecular hydrogen forms on the surface of the metal. Sulfate-reducing bacteria can oxidize this molecular hydrogen to produce the hydrogen sulfide ions and water. Iron ions partly precipitate to form iron 2 sulfide, and then another chemical reaction occurs between the iron and the water, producing iron hydroxide. Now in Leptospirillum ferrophyllum, the complete rusting of a nail takes place over 2 months. However, this can be significantly sped up by starving the bacteria, which causes them to take in any available nutrients in as short a time as possible. It's been suggested that this method can cause corrosion to speed up, so digesting a nail can take as short as 3 days. However, this is still far slower than the Zurks seen throughout Stray. But what exactly is going on when these metal-eating bacteria come into contact with a metal object, such as the robotic helpers seen throughout the game? We know that oxidation can help extract copper, nickel, iron or zinc with the help of biological mechanisms. Whilst not a lot is known about the specific mechanisms going on inside bacteria like Leptospirillum ferrophyllum, if we took a look at another metal-eating bacteria, C. metallidorans, we find a bacteria that's capable of digesting metals and breaking them down into useful trace elements, taking in heavy metals such as copper and gold. These metals are heavily used in electronics as they're highly conductive materials, and the robotic helpers found in the underground slums are probably full of this stuff. So we have these rod-shaped bacteria which primarily live in soil enriched with heavy metals, something that would poison your average cell, whether it be human, plant or viral, owing to the formation of hydroxyl radicals that can lead to lipid, protein or DNA damage. Well, besides the toxic heavy metals in this soil, life isn't too bad for our metallidoran bacteria. There's an abundance of hydrogen to conserve energy, and thanks to the toxicity of heavy metals, there's next to no competition from other microorganisms. And living in such an environment means that it's natural that the bacteria would find a way to protect itself from these toxic substances. When the toxic gold or copper particles come into contact with the bacteria, chemical reactions occur. Copper, which usually occurs in nature in a form that's difficult for a cell to take up, is converted into a form that's easier for the bacterium to take up, and is able to enter the interior of the cell. The same happens to the gold components. Once a large amount of copper accumulates inside of the bacteria, it will be pumped out by the copper exporting P-type ATPase, otherwise known as CupA, which is pivotal to the copper resistance exhibited by this bacteria. However, once gold enters the equation, this enzyme's activity is suppressed and the toxic copper and gold compounds remain in the cell. This mixture of copper and gold is more toxic than they are on their own, and to solve this problem the metallidoran bacteria developed another enzyme, CopA. CopA is able to transform the copper and gold back into their originally difficult to absorb forms, which means less copper and gold compounds enter the cell's interior and the bacteria is poisoned less. This enzyme pumps out purified copper in tiny gold nuggets, which are only a few nanometers in diameter, and they're produced along the cell's exterior. So there we go. There's a bit of the science behind the Zurks, but it's no way near the end of the science behind Stray. This is a world where trees are genetically altered to grow without any light, and robotic AI that are pretty much human. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd love to cover more of the science behind this gem of a game later down the line. And tell me in the comments down below what you thought of Stray, because at this point I'm presuming that you've watched at least one stream of it, because it seems to be one of the most anticipated games of this year. As always, if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to help combat the ever-changing and frustrating YouTube algorithm, then make sure you share the video to help my channel grow. If you have any scientific subjects or topics that you'd like to see me cover in the future, then please tell me in the comments down below. As well as that, follow me on Twitter to get updates on the latest science of videos, and join my Discord for chats about science, gaming and more. But until then, this has been the Science of Stray. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you're looking for game-based content, then you can join me over on Twitch, where I live stream 3 times a week playing all manner of games suggested by the community. Or if you want to support the channel even further, then you could also contribute to my Patreon, where you'll get behind the scenes access to the creation of all videos, as well as being able to vote on what the next Science of video will be.